be? Yes! Hello there, friends. I've triumphed over technology and managed to get this thing to stream live. There have been failures in the recent past. There have been definitely videos lost into the ether of late. Hopefully this isn't a repeat of that experience. Today I just wanted to do a quick one and just talk about the fact that you're probably not that clever. Emphasis on that. I assume that you are a clever human being. But there's a tendency among human beings when faced with a choice between, there go the fighter jets, faced with a choice between there's a piece of information I'm missing. Alright. Calm it down. It's Fleet Week. So when faced between the choice of there's a piece of information that I'm missing and everybody else is dumb, a lot of folks, especially younger folks, I don't want to pick on the younger folks, but it is kind of true, folks tend to pick up that this isn't a good pattern over the course of their life, but a lot of folks tend to go with, everybody else must just be really dumb, right? They haven't noticed this obvious solution to this problem. So, sort of, my favorite example of this is if you're stuck in traffic on the freeway, once in a while, you'll see some jerkwad just driving along on the shoulder. Just, there he goes, right? Brrr, just driving along. And what I project is that guy thinks he's very clever. Like, wait a minute, I could just do this, and as long as I don't get caught, it's not a problem. I get what I want, right? Awesome! Man, look at all these suckers over here. They're stupid. They haven't figured out that they could just do this? And it's like, no. We've all figured that out. But we're all also reflecting upon the fact that we live in a civilization. If everybody breaks rules like that whenever it suits them, then the whole system breaks down, right? We need to reserve some space for emergency vehicles, especially because if it's, if there's gridlock on the freeway, there's quite likely an accident. Somebody's life might be at stake here. So we're all going to do the decent thing and just sit in our lane and not drive on the side of the road and risk everybody else's safety and well-being to pursue our own short-term needs, right? That's this big picture view that everybody else is responding to and that this guy over here doesn't have. And so he's like, these guys are morons. You could just drive on the side. It's great. The most extreme case that I know of that sort of phenomenon is actually the serial killer Ted Bundy, who you can find, this came up in an ethics class that I took, you can find an interview with Ted Bundy where he's just explaining that he didn't understand why everybody didn't just do whatever they wanted, because a bad thing only happens if you get caught, right? So why shouldn't I just do whatever I want? And it took until the last couple months of his life when it finally sunk in that, hey, these people are about to end your life, rest of society, that he finally realized that there's a piece that he's missing. He was just missing the module in your brain that's responsible for the understanding that other people are actual full-fledged beings that have their own desires and their own vision of themselves in the world, and they're not just objects that you should manipulate to fulfill your own desires, right? It finally clicked in for him, oh, I'm just missing something. Y'all are having a completely different experience. Oh, I'm not super smart. I'm deficient. But, that's a really unfortunate revelation to have just before the end of your life when there's no chance to fix anything. So just keeping that in mind, how does this intersect with being a happy human being? When you are engaging with groups of your fellow human beings, very often, if you're coming into a scene and you're unfamiliar with the history of that community or the norms of that community, it can appear that when that community is dealing with a problem, there's this really easy solution. This is low-hanging fruit. We could just do this thing. And that sort of, everybody else must just be a moron, can creep on in there and cause you to do things like interject with, hey, why don't you guys just do this? And you're bringing up the issue that has been discussed to death, and everybody who has the full context knows is an incredibly bad idea. And then, you get some unpleasant blowback. That's a pretty common pattern, especially like in open source software development. There's this, why don't you just, it's like a trigger word for project leadership, just because they have to constantly deal with that. And pulling somebody in and getting them contextualized, giving them enough information that they can understand why the obvious solution is actually a bad idea, is a really sort of expensive process. It takes a tremendous amount of effort to carefully and considerately bring somebody up to speed in that way, in response to their question. And it's really easy to ask those sorts of questions, and so it just ends up becoming a huge drain on people's resources, constantly fielding these, why don't you just, where somebody is presuming that everybody that they're talking to is a moron, right? Because if you, as a novice, an outsider, can perceive a solution with a couple moments reflection, that's probably actually something that the experts have perceived as well and considered. And so if they're not doing it, there's probably a good reason. And so that's a situation where if you're mindful of, hey, wait a minute, I'm probably not that clever. I'm probably not going to be the person who just comes in and sees something that everybody else has missed within 3 seconds of thinking about a given problem domain. If you have that mindfulness, you can go, probably there's a piece of information that I don't have access to, that everybody else is working with. What is that piece of information? And then you can do the work of getting yourself up to speed instead of offloading that onto somebody else. And then you're more likely to be welcomed into the group. And if you really do find just an out of the blue solution that everybody has missed, you can frame it as, hey guys, I've been looking into this, and I'm just wondering, why was it that we ruled out going down this path? Can somebody get me up to speed? And frame it as acknowledging that the people that you're interacting with are probably competent and have probably investigated all of the easy solutions and have good reasons for not taking them up. And it may be that there is a piece that you're missing, and it may be that you point out something that everybody missed and they'll be grateful for that. But your set of outcomes is much better than if you just storm in making the obvious assumption that everybody else is an idiot and you're the only one who can see the obvious solution. A couple of follow-up comments on that. This has just been floating around in my head for ages because it's one of the few things that really can I have difficulty with. It gets under my skin if I'm doing something in life and somebody just like comes in, interrupts, like, what are you doing? And I'm like, oh, I'm working on this. And I'm like, why don't you just do it that way? And I'm like, can we have a conversational norm that you don't presume that I'm an idiot? That I don't know. Just one of my pet peeves, a thing that I'm working on, trying to make sure that I engage with that in a constructive way, but, there are people out there for whom... It's jet time again, hold on. It's jet time. It's jet time. It's jet time. It's jet time. I have to take Fleet Week to a happy place because otherwise it's irritating to just have fighter jets like flying over your house every so often. Random story, just for funsies. When I first moved to San Francisco, I didn't know about Fleet Week, and I didn't know about like the air raid test sirens, and I came to know about both of those things at the same time. So every Tuesday in San Francisco, they do a test of the outdoor warning systems. All of the sirens go off and whatnot, and eventually a voice comes on and says, this is a test of the something warning system. And one of my first weeks going to my university, I was up on the top of the hill in the third floor taking my HRP class, and we were on break, and everybody had left, and I'm just standing there and looking out this window, and it faced east out over the bay, and I hear this siren going off. Just, and I'm like, what the heck is, what is up with that? And then I see a fighter jet just flying directly at me, and I'm like, that's a military aircraft. I still remember enough about my aviation nerdistry to remember that. I think that's That's a FA-18 Hornet. Why is that flying at me while air raid sirens go off? And you know, it didn't quite brown my shorts, but it definitely did scare the crap out of me for a moment. And then this was a test came on, and some people started filing back in, and I was like, "What? What's going on with that?" You know, this jet veered off. And they're like, "It's Fleet Week, dude. It just happens every year." Oh. So anyway, all of which has been a ramble. Back on point. There are people out there who are going to be, you know, not driven towards a happy place if you make the presumption that they're an idiot as you begin engaging with them. So, and that's what that really entails if you try to point out some really obvious solution that you hit upon after, you know, 10 seconds of considering the problem. So just being mindful of that, taking a moment to step back and go, I'm probably not that clever. It's more likely that there's a piece of information that everybody else is working with that I don't have. It's going to just stand you in a better stead. It's going to get you a much warmer welcome. And it's going to make it easier to deal with your fellow human beings as you're working through the path of being a happy human being.